Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Graduate Meteorology Program Information Session webinar. For those joining us for the first time, welcome, and for anyone who has joined us for our webinars before, welcome back. Before we begin the proceedings, I would like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the Kulin Nations, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet. I would also like to acknowledge and pay respect to the traditional custodians of the lands that we are gathered on in all states and territories, and pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. We acknowledge and respect their continuing culture and the contribution they make to Australia. Today we will be giving you an in-depth look at our graduate diploma in meteorology program, including information on what the Bureau does, what roles exist in meteorology, what life in the Bureau is like, and how to apply. My name is Jordan and I will be your moderator today. I'm joined by Claire, whose voice you heard before. She will be producing today's webinar. Together we will help make the webinar as interactive as possible. Before we start, may I ask for your attention as we cover off some housekeeping items. With the current situation as it is in Australia, this webinar will be conducted from our respective homes and office spaces around the country. Please bear this in mind as we may encounter some technical issues during the broadcast. Our broadcast today will run for 60 minutes with plenty of time allocated for questions. This webinar is also being recorded and the video will be shared with you via email. For first-time webinar attendees, please see some helpful tips on your screen. Most importantly, please note the chat box where you can send through any questions or feedback for the presenters. Please use this and not the Q&A box to send your questions to us during the session, and we will answer as many as possible during the allocated breaks. It's the speech bubble button on the right of your screen. The icon will turn blue once it's on. If you want to test out the chat box now, feel free to tell us your name and where you're dialing in from. Thank you to everyone who has sent in questions during the registration process. We've used them to help shape the content you'll see today, and we'll get through as many of them as we can. And finally, I'm delighted to introduce you to our presenters. Firstly, we have Dr. Mick Pope, who is the manager of the Graduate Diploma of Meteorology, Grace Legg, a senior meteorologist at the Bureau and a former graduate of the course, and finally, Bronwyn Duncan. She is a recent graduate and now a Defence Decision Support Meteorologist. Welcome, everybody. Leading us off is Dr. Mick Pope. He has been with the Bureau for over 20 years, most of which has been spent in training. Mick has been a forecaster for New South Wales and the Northern Territory. He also has a PhD from Monash University in tropical climate. Next, we have Grace Legg. She joined the meteorology course in 2013 and worked as a meteorologist in Darwin's regional office. She then later moved back to Melbourne as a senior forecaster in the Extreme Weather Desk and last year joined the national production as an operations leader. And lastly, we have Bronwyn Duncan. She is part of the Bureau's Defence Weather Services. She supplies environmental intelligence through aviation weather forecasts, weather watch, and briefings to support and enhance the capability of the Australian Defence Force. So we have the best people possible for today's webinar. It's going to be a packed hour for you, including a welcome, a little bit about the Bureau and how to apply, affirmative measures, a day in the life, and a Q&A. We actually have two of those, so plenty of time to get your questions in. But let's not keep you waiting any longer and get straight to Mick. He'll start us off with an overview of the course and how you can apply. Don't forget, you can get your questions answered today, so send them in as soon as you think of them. Just use the chat button and start sending them in now. All yours, Mick.
Thanks, Jordan. Well, good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are in these lands now called Australia. As you have heard, my name is Dr. Mick Pope, and I have the best job in the Bureau of Meteorology. Why do I say that? Well, firstly, I get to recruit new graduates into the organisation. I get to induct you into the values of the Bureau of Meteorology and the Australian Public Service, together with my fantastic team in Meteorologist Initial Training, the section of the Bureau of Meteorology Training Centre, which we like to call MIT, to train you up and all the skills and knowledge that you need. And then I get to see you at some stage later in your career, as I'm getting to see both Grace and Bronwyn, and feel a certain sense of pride that I've been involved in helping you achieve your goal of establishing yourself in a career in operational meteorology. So I'm very excited to talk to you this morning or this afternoon, and hopefully we'll be seeing some of you here at Broadmeadows next year. I've been with the Bureau since 1997, so that makes me feel old. That's last century now. And I've had a brief but interesting career in operational meteorology. The highlights included working in the Sydney Regional Forecasting Centre. That's the old model of operations, working in severe weather, in particular issuing fire forecasts and severe thunderstorm warnings, in working at the Williamtown RAAF base, just north of Newcastle, in spending a couple of months in Darwin, one stint which was working in the forecasting centre there, and another in support of an international cloud experiment. But every meteorologist has their war story, which is their story of a high impact event, which left a lasting impact, if you'll forgive the pun, on them. And for me, it was the April 14 hailstorm of 1999. A storm that teased us by initially going out to sea and then motored up the coast for several hours in what was the largest insurance payout related to weather in Australian history. And you can see on the right-hand side there, up to cricket ball-sized hail. I was lucky my car did not get damaged because it was at the car park at work. And that certainly left an impact upon me in terms of both the terror and the wonder of the weather, the need to have strong conceptual models of how the weather works, the need to be able to deal with customers and clients, and to be a competent and well-informed meteorologist. And since that event, we've bought new Doppler radars around the country, which enables us to better forecast such events. So that's a little bit about me. Let's talk about the Bureau. So our vision, it's to be an organisation of global standing that is highly valued by the community for our pivotal role in enabling a safe, prosperous, secure and healthy Australia, which acknowledges the fact that everybody in the Australian society, in fact, around the planet, engages every day in weather-sensitive activities. And so we want to be able to serve the community, to serve businesses by producing the best possible information that we can, which is to provide trusted, reliable and responsive weather, water, climate and ocean services for Australia all day, every day. And the main focus of this recruitment campaign is in the weather space. So how do we achieve this? We do by focusing upon impact and value. So producing products and services that can really impact our customers and clients in a way in which they can make decisions. In particular too, in an age where meteorology is, the technology's come such a long way where there's a lot of things that can be automated. For the meteorologist, it's where can they add most value and impact for a forecast product or a warning product. It's also about operational excellence, which means both being able to verify the performance of numerical models and the forecasts that our meteorologists issue, but excellent customer service, really getting to know what people need, what decisions that they make, and giving them the best service as a result of that. It means insight and innovation. Insight, of course, into what our customers need and want, but also innovation. We have a research section that's dedicated to producing new products and services for customers, for fine-tuning the models and implementing high resolution versions of those. But what makes all that stick together, of course, is the Bureau of Values and Culture, the so-called Bureau Way. So we're a customer-focused organisation, as you've heard me say already. We're a teamwork-driven organisation where we all get along, and enabled to do that, we value a diversity of our employees. Let me give you some examples. So the past 2 years, I've organised an event together with the students around the day Women in STEM. Now, while we're not yet at a 50% division between men and women in the operational ranks, yet we consistently have a higher ratio in terms of our graduates than the STEM graduates coming out of science programs. Now, you've just heard me use a binary. I'm also a member of the Storm Pride Network, which is a working group in the organisation that promotes diversity and the inclusion of LGBTQI+ people in our organisation. And this year we have our first non-binary student on course. You'll also hear a little bit later about our Affirmative Action Program, and I'm also a member of the Reconciliation Action Plan, or RAP, working group. So we're an organisation that values diversity. We know that the best possible solutions as an organisation as a whole is predicated upon representing the diversity of the community that we serve, and that better insights and innovation comes from having a diverse working team. The end goal of all of that, is to contribute to a future with 0 lives lost through natural hazards. So providing the best possible service of forecasts and warnings so people can make decisions that will save lives, and to contribute to a 2022 economy of $2 billion of added social and economic impact and value to the Australian community. So that is who we are. Where will your career journey begin? Well, you'll enter a program with me as your first supervisor in the organisation. It's full-time, permanent study with the Bureau. So you begin your career as a graduate, and the first thing you must do is pass the course, which is full-time. It's pretty intensive, as any past graduate will attest to, and I'm sure Bronwyn and Grace will tell you that. It's 10 months long, and it's here at the Bureau of Meteorology Training Centre at Broadmeadows at our specialist facility. Quite comfortable it is too. You get paid $56,630 per annum, although there will be an adjustment to that in September. And that the precise amount depends upon the wages index at the time, plus an additional 15.4% superannuation. We are Australia's only education provider that offers a qualification that meets the World Meteorological Organisation's standard for meteorologists. That is a basic instruction package for meteorologists. In obtaining that, you will be legally permitted to issue aviation forecasts because the International Civil Aviation Organization requires that. You will also have a nationally and internationally recognised graduate diploma in meteorology, which is AQF7, and that would enable you to go on and do postgraduate studies, a master's or a PhD in meteorology, should you choose to. So let's have a quick look at what's covered in this program. There's a few images there represented the things that we look at. The first is something known as the forecast funnel, and what that represents is the maths and physics that you will cover that enable you to build what we call conceptual or mental models of how the atmosphere functions. You are required to have a background in physics and maths, and it is true that once you're in operations, you don't solve equations in your head, but you do have strong working models of the atmosphere that you can carry with you. So the global scale is, where are you? What season is it? And what kind of climate drivers are operating, like the El Nino Southern Oscillation, for example. The synoptic scale is the scale of high and low pressure systems and fronts and troughs of low pressure that you see on charts in the media all the time. And then the mesoscale and the local scale is getting down to the scale of fogs and individual thunderstorms, and thinking about the impacts that are of importance to clients and customers. Heavy rainfall events, individual thunderstorms, weather on the scale of a fire front. One of the great advances in operational meteorology, of course, is the numerical weather prediction models, both in terms of the sophistication of their physics and their resolution in time and space. And what you can see there is some guidance for basic thunderstorm forecasting. So this is where really huge advances have been made, and we've seen great improvements in the accuracy of our forecasts as a result. But we're not, we could train you, I suppose, very quickly just to interpret the model output and turn it into words, or just crank the handle on an algorithm that spits out the forecast. We're not training you, however, to follow blindly models, but to interrogate them and to think about them and communicate the results to clients. So a great tool is one thing, but an understanding is another. The satellite image on the right is indicative of the fact that we teach you how to interpret remote sense data so that you can assess the situation, the weather situation at a given time, issue your forecast, and then continuously monitor and update forecasts as new information comes in. And then finally, all that knowledge in the world is of no use unless you can communicate it to customers and clients and your colleagues. And here's an image of someone who's doing some media to talk about tropical cyclone behaviour. And every morning here in the Bureau of Meteorology Training Centre, we get students to perform chats to learn that kind of skill. So that's stage one, February to November of next year. Stage two would be job readiness training at Melbourne and Brisbane, which are our centres for the production of public weather forecasts and aviation forecasts, and also some Australian Defence Force sites, which Bron will talk to you a little bit about in a short while. So really that's working alongside a more experienced meteorologist in the process that we call dualing. Consider it an apprenticeship where you learn the ropes, where information from someone who's more experienced is passed on. So I guess what it says is that you don't stop learning once you leave training centre. You learn on the job, And in stage 3, you're an independent operational meteorologist under close supervision, so you're never really alone in terms of decision making and issuing forecasts. And you have access to more on-the-job training, as well as rotation through other parts of the business. So your initial posting will not represent the entirety of your career, and you'll hear more about that from both Grace and Bronwyn in a short while. The various areas that you can pick a speciality in. Firstly, community services. That includes national production, which is where the gridded forecasts are manipulated to produce worded products. A bit later on after that, decision support services, where you're an embedded meteorologist working with customers very, very closely to give them tailored information. And environmental prediction, where forecast warnings are issued. Aviation includes both low-level and high-level aviation. So the issuing of aerodrome forecasts for individual airports and broader geographical areas with a lovely obscure title of GAF, and then upper level type forecasts, which includes forecasting where turbulence is going to be, the location of the jet stream and things like that. Oh, and also volcanoes and the dust that they produce. National security is working with our defence forces, and Bronwyn will talk to you a little bit about that in a while. And energy and resources, which is the mining sector. Things like, did you know that oil and gas exploration, the rigs can be detached physically and be moored for safety, or the energy industry, so they know when to provide extra electricity and so on. So a variety of careers and specialities that you enter into. What about the selection criteria then? What kind of stuff do you need? Well, when you're writing your application for me to have an initial glance at, or when you're preparing for an interview, think about STAR. Situation. What were you faced with? What was the specific task that you had to engage in? What action did you take? And what was the result? So, customer having trouble with my words. So excited. Customer centricity. The ability to build trust with a customer, to engage with them, connect and understand what it is they want. So for example, if you've worked in retail or hospitality or some other role where you've engaged with customers, you can illustrate your skills to meet the selection criteria. Collaboration, the need to engage in productive working relationships in a service-oriented team. As I said before, you're very rarely alone. You've always got support from another colleague to help you make decisions and reach the common goal, which is to issue forecasts and warnings, again, for zero lives lost and to add that $2 billion to the Australian economy. So have you worked in a sporting team, on team assignments, again, in customer service or hospitality or some other working environment? 3, decision making. We're all about helping people make decisions that are weather sensitive. You need to be able to listen to customers, to be able to communicate clearly, and you need, of course, to make your own decisions in terms of what information you present forward and what's the ultimate call in terms of the forecast. The Bureau Way I've already talked about, so if you can align with our purpose and our values, then you can illustrate from your working experience, your study experience, how you've embodied and upheld those values. And then finally, but still very important, is academic achievement. To have second year physics and maths as part of an engineering or a science degree. Have you solved differential equations? Do you know the 0th through 2nd laws of thermodynamics? Have you done some optics and mechanics and all these sorts of things? These are all prerequisites that are set down by the World Meteorological Organization as part of a BIPM package. And if you've got some gaps there, then there are courses that you can do at university to fill those. But if you tick those boxes, then you're on your way. You must, to be engaged as an Australian public servant with the Bureau, you must be an Australian citizen, or if you're holding permanent residency or an appropriate work entitlement, such as those we provide to New Zealand citizens, you will be asked to provide relevant documents and be engaged on the proviso that you will actively apply for citizenship. That's not just a Bureau thing, that's a public service requirement. Our timeline then, applications are open from the 2nd of July until 11:30 p.m. on the 26th of July. So coming up really quickly. Once they've been sorted through initially, there will be some pre-recorded video interviews. Now that freaks some people out. They're staring at a camera with no one to look back at, but it does really test your comm skills and your ability to deal with a little bit of stress. Try not to stress. It's we're at the other side watching these videos sometime down the track and just trying to see who you are. And then through September and October, there will be online interviews and an assessment centre. Again, in the times of COVID and so on, that's the way we operated last year, and it will keep everyone safe as a result. Where to apply? Well, at the moment, you can go to our careers webpage. So if you go to the bottom right-hand corner of the Bureau of Meteorology webpage, you click on careers and then find Graduate Met. Then the image that you can see there, you should be able to click on that from the 2nd of July, and you'll be taken to the page you can see there, bomcareers.nga.net.au, etc., and you'll be able to fill in your application there. How to apply? We need evidence of citizenship status, some contact details, your employment history, and your education details. I need to see your undergraduate transcripts. Fine if you've done a master's, fine if you've done a PhD, all that information is valuable, but I need to assess your marks for your undergraduate degree, all the relevant subjects. There are optional diversity questions which you can answer. You can upload or must upload your resume/CV. There will be a statement addressing the selection criteria that you need to complete. The names of 2 professional referees, and often that's going to be a work and an academic, so a family friend won't be enough. And you can at that time apply for the recruitability program if you need any assistance through the whole process. And at any time you can contact Graduate Mets at bom.gov.au, and if it's a technical question, it'll come through to me. If it's more a question about the process of application, then someone in our HR division will speak to you. Unfortunately, Sharon Ware can't be with us this morning, this afternoon. She's Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Liaison Officer, so I'm going to read to you her script that she's provided me. So it's about an affirmative measure provision, which are positions that are open to Aboriginal and or Torres Strait Islander candidates. As a part of the Bureau's commitment to improving Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander employment outcomes, we have positions available within this campaign allocated to affirmative measures. There is no difference in the outline or the structure or the end result of the graduate meteorology program when applying for an affirmative measure position. The only difference is that you need to submit additional documents to confirm your Indigenous Australian heritage when you apply. This can be done in 2 ways. Option 1, letter from an Indigenous organisation. The purpose of this letter is to have an Aboriginal and or Torres Strait Islander organisation recognise the candidate as an Aboriginal and or Torres Strait Islander person. Option 2, statutory declarations. If a candidate is unable to obtain a letter from an Indigenous organisation, they may provide the Bureau with 2 statutory declarations. These include a personally signed statutory stat dec from the candidate and either a stat dec completed by an APS employee who is also Aboriginal and or Torres Strait Islander, or a stat dec completed by an Indigenous service provider such as a University Indigenous Support Unit or an Indigenous Medical Service. Now, all documents must include a statement confirming that the candidate is of Aboriginal and or Torres Strait Islander descent and identifies as Aboriginal and or Torres Strait Islander and is recognised by their community as a person who is Aboriginal and or Torres Strait Islander. We also have staff support processes in place, such as buddies and mentors who can give you sound advice and guidance in the workplace. We also have our IEN, which is the Bureau's Indigenous Employees Network. We come together regularly to support each other in the workplace and to discuss various events. Sharon currently works in the Diversity, Inclusion and STEM team and also provides staff support to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander staff across the Bureau. Her team also has reference groups, we also have reference groups such as the Reconciliation Action Plan, as I spoke about before, multicultural, disability awareness, LGBTQI, and gender groups. All staff across the Bureau are welcome to submit an interest in joining these groups. If you have any further questions for Sharon along these lines, you see the email on the slide. It's diversity@bom.gov.au. And with that, I hand now back to Jordan.
Great, thank you, Mick, for starting us off today. Good to know more about the program. Before Grace and Bronwyn give us an inside look at what it's like to be a meteorologist, we've got some time to take your questions. Remember, hit the little speech bubble button on the right of your taskbar and start sending them in. We have a full team on deck to answer your questions, so we'll try to get through as many as possible. So Vida has a good question for you, Mick. Should everyone who wants to apply for the Bureau of Meteorology course have mathematics or physics background?
Yep. As I said it earlier, it's mathematics and physics. So the level is to second year. So to be able to solve partial differential equations, which we do a bit of on the course, and those prerequisite physics topics, particularly thermodynamics, which tends to be considered in depth in second year, but also subjects like optics. That can be in an atmospheric science major. We'll often tick off on those areas if you've done dynamical meteorology, and certainly in a straight science degree or an engineering degree, but you must have both.
Okay. Fabian has asked, again for you, Mick, is there an age limit on who can apply and be accepted into the program?
Really, really good question. Working for the Australia Public Servants, well, we cannot be ageist. So it doesn't matter how long ago you completed the prerequisites, but you must have them. Of course, the longer it is, the staler that knowledge becomes. And so it does mean that you're going to have to work a little bit harder. We can certainly talk before you arrive about sorts of things you can brush up on. We have some review material that you can certainly view through. Just keep in mind that it's an operational shift work environment. I certainly am happy not doing shift work anymore as a 51-year-old. But look, as long as you're fit to do shift work and you've got the required background, then there is no age limit. Certainly not.
Fantastic. Grace, this is a question for you. Ross has asked, what are the recommended resources to learn meteorology?
Yeah, that's a good one. There's actually a fair bit of research of things you can look up online, especially through COMET, which is a MET-Ed program, which is actually made and created by agencies across the world in meteorology. So it was really the US Met Service that started it, but the Bureau is also a part of it, as well as other countries, including the UK. So that's a really good thing to look up, especially. Of course, there's plenty of other books and things you can look up, but I would suggest starting with something like that. Or if you're just trying to get the lingo, you can always go and look up the Bureau's videos online, which start to talk about some of the things I already mentioned, like El Nino or something, if you're unfamiliar with those terms.
Okay. I might bring Bronwyn in for this question. Evanston has asked, and I hope I've said that right, how maths intensive is the graduate program?
Yeah, so the graduate program does involve a fair bit of maths. As Mick has mentioned, you need to be able to do your PDEs and your ODEs. And we do a lot of the course is doing derivations and learning the background to a lot of the fundamental concepts that you then apply when you actually go out and do operational forecasting. But there can be times during the course where the maths is a little bit more challenging. On my course, one of my best friends hadn't done maths for a while. She was coming into the course a little bit after her degree, and there was a little bit of a learning curve. But if you take the time and you do some extra foundations or building on it, it'll definitely help.
Okay. Ayla, and I hope I've said that correctly, Mick has a great question about COVID. How will the training be affected by the lockdowns, and can we still attend in person?
Yeah, look, last year we were together for something like 8 weeks, wasn't it, Bron? And then we went into lockdown and never came back, and we thought, oh, we'll have to come back to do this, and we couldn't, and we adapted. Oh, we'll have to come back face to face to do that, and we couldn't, and we adapted. So we've certainly, both staff and students, showed resilience and demonstrated that if you have to, you can conduct the entire course online. Now this year, we've been blessed with being in the building as often as we can, which has been great, and you form those relationships and you're able to learn from your peers in a much more efficient kind of manner. Now we're kind of we've been in and out of a mixed mode, if you like. So, and that's the way we'll continue to operate forever, I think. Being in when we can, a number of days a week, and then learning remotely, because it's a nice change. People demand flexibility these days, and we offer that. But certainly, we know we can deliver the entire program. If the entire country went down into lockdown tomorrow, we know we can deliver the program and get the job done. But next year's course, I would anticipate, with vaccines and everything else, that we'll be face to face for the most of it.
Yeah, let's hope so. Continuing with you, Mick, Alan has asked, I've done first but not second year level of physics. Will I need to catch up in physics?
Yeah, look, you might do, and depends what your major is. Again, it's all about have you covered there's a whole list of topics that you need to have covered. It's thermo in particular that we want people to be comfortable with, because thermodynamics, the atmosphere is a fluid that changes phase and heats exchange and all these sorts of processes. So if you've done some chemistry, that might suit, if it's done it in engineering or so on. So it comes down to me that this is where a lot of my time goes into looking at individual transcripts and digging deep into syllabi to make sure I'm making the fairest possible decision.
Okay. And again, Mick, a lot of people asking you, since you're the head of the course, Aaron would like to know, how important is academic GPA, excuse me, for determining candidate suitability?
Really good question. Yeah, look, it's one of those things that it's the first hurdle. And once you're over that hurdle, we're looking at everything else about you. But you need a credit average. What that translates into a GPA, I'm not quite certain, but it depends. So I look at an academic transcript, and if you've done a course in Romanian basket weaving, that's great that you're a well-rounded individual. But I'm going to just look at your maths and physics subjects and assess those and give them a particular mark. So it comes out about a credit average.
Okay. It's a shame for the basket weavers out there, but I'm sure they'll cope. If you have any other questions, we will have a second Q&A, and that'll be our larger Q&A section. Please start sending those questions in now. We want to get to as many as we can, so we will get to more of them then. But right now, Grace will start us off by telling us the day-to-day activities you'd complete as a meteorologist.
Thanks so much for that, Jordan. Mick, if you just, yep, excellent. So I'm going to talk a little bit about day in life. I will talk a little bit about what I've done so far in my career in the Bureau, and then go a bit more into the details of what you could expect when you are actually an operational forecaster. So if you head to the next slide, as mentioned, I did the course back in 2013. That is a picture of me with my first chart that I ever drew, and I was very excited about it. You do still draw charts by hand. We still do it in most operational settings. It's a great way of checking and verifying the current forecast, and also the models as well. So it's something just important to know. And of course, that's the textbooks that I completed while on the MET course through there. You just head to the next slide. From the MET course, I went to the Darwin Regional Centre. That's the old model lingo for you, but it is the Darwin office through there. And that's a lovely photo that was taken actually from the office itself of a pretty impressive thunderstorm coming through. There I forecasted both in public weather. So that's their gridded forecast, which I'll talk about in a bit more detail. And that's the sort of day-to-day weather you see on the website telling you it's going to be a possible thunderstorm. I also did fire weather forecasting, did some severe weather forecasting for thunderstorms as well as tropical cyclones. And I also worked in the Aviation Centre and something called the Volcanic Ash Advisory Centre, which is both under aviation, which is actually forecasting where volcanic ash will spread in the atmosphere when there are eruptions, as it causes a lot of problems for the aviation industry. After that, I went to something called the Extreme Weather Desk, which is mainly a surge support unit. So I was sent around the country during large weather events to sort of bolster the team through there. We also developed new products and did a lot of national media as well. On to the next slide. I now work in what's called national production as an operations lead or leader, depending on the word lingo we want to use. That is the team that is now responsible, or will become over the transition, responsible for all our routine public weather forecasts. We're actually one team, but we're split in area between the Melbourne and Brisbane offices, just to allow a bit more resilience if one of the offices was to go down. So we're, as mentioned, responsible for public weather forecasting, and we work very closely with what's called the Community Services Group, which is basically everyone that's working directly with the community rather than just one sort of agency. So we're split between Community Services Group and what's called Business Services Group, which is where aviation, energy and resource and defence all sit under, working directly with one customer. Community is much more about public, so we get all those public weather forecasts, but it also under that umbrella is things like embedded meteorologists within emergency services or other departments, and also it does include our warning services as well. So we work closely with them to make sure, and we are the 24/7 section of community services group. So overnight, a lot of the responsibilities come to us overnight. So if a warning was required, we of course would do that. And one of the things that's really important to realize about forecasting and meteorology is there's a lot of information you've got and you can always find more. So when you're making something like a forecast, you have unbelievable amounts of information in front of you, and you've got to decide where it's worth your time investing in that. We've got really good models that can put out pretty good forecasts. So where can I add value to that and really increase the forecast to make sure it is best for the customer on the ground? And so if I was given infinite time, I could probably send it on one forecast if I wanted. So our job is really assessing where we get the most impact and value for our time. So deciding what systems coming through are more important to our customers and to the community as a whole. And then the other thing that I am responsible for as one of the leads is actually the risk assessment for staffing levels across all of community services. So we decide which section should be standing up and we're putting more staff into for large events ahead of time to make sure that we have the right people in the right place. On to the next slide. So I actually took a picture of my desk the other day. So this is what a desk at the Forecasting Centre looks like. You generally have 4 screens because there's always plenty of observations and models to look at throughout there, as well as the products you're actually making. Now, some sections are 24/7. So as mentioned, that shift work, that means you'd be working night shifts as well as day shifts. National production is one of them. So I do work nights and days. Aviation is the other major 24/7 section that we do have. Other sections are more activated, so they have routine staff on each day for something like severe weather or fire weather. But during big events, they might be asked to go 24/7, in which case more staff will be put on ahead of time and they'll sort of up their rostering. Generally, when you're on shift, there's sort of levels to the hierarchy, if you will, a little bit. So you have above you generally a supervising meteorologist who's normally 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, and manages the day-to-day. They're the ones that make sure that they have the staff on when needed and make sure that the operation centers continue to run. For our sections, we have the leads that are actually on 24/7 as well, so that we have that point of contact if we do need to staff up any of the sections. Under us, there's the senior meteorologists who are generally in charge of making sure all the products are going out, and they're ultimately responsible for a lot of that stuff coming out. And then there's a meteorologist under them that generally make those products, but will work with the senior meteorologist and gain skills by sitting with them on a day-to-day basis. So learning never really stops, even once you go solo and start on a desk. You're always working as a team, which allows you to gain a lot more of the skills and understanding of the weather as you continue to sort of move through your career. On to the next slide. So in terms of the duties for a forecaster, it changes depending on which section you're in, but generally you have a similar sort of day to day. You come in and you shift at the start and you get a handover. If you're in a 24/7 section, you'll get a physical handover from someone who will talk you through what happened during their shift and the major sort of weather events that are upcoming in your forecasting. If you're not in a 24/7 section, it's often a written document that will have been done by the person before you so that you can make sure you hit the ground running and know all the important facts about what's expected for that day or for the next week, depending on what scale you're forecasting at. And then you start your shift normally by familiarizing yourself. What are your current forecasts? What are the current observations? What are the models doing? What do I need to start looking at to either maybe amend my forecast or to look at so that I can get ready to do those forecasts? And then we do what is called the forecasting funnel. Start with the broad scale, start with the larger systems coming through and start moving to finer scale events to understand exactly what the weather is going to be on the ground. Of course, we take into account verification, always making sure that our forecasts are verified and understanding maybe where maybe they weren't so great, so we can build that understanding into our next forecast. So continually improving our forecasts always. And then, of course, we've got to create them, and depending on where you are will be how you create those forecasts themselves. So if you go on to the next slide, in terms of what it actually means to forecast, obviously we have pretty amazing models these days and we have lots of them. So there's basically 5 global models that we use and there's subsets within all of them. So for example, Access is the Australian model that we use. that we created. And then there's subsets of that that are called smaller scale areas with better resolution around certain areas in Australia. There's also ensembles of the various models, which some of the ensembles have 50 members of it. So as you can see, there's a lot of information being thrown at you quickly. And then we have consensus forecasts within that. But what we have to do is take that information and really understand what's likely to happen. And that's where your conceptual models come in. All models are generally parameterized and have some physics behind them. So understanding where that works really well and where their models might struggle a little bit in these systems, and understanding with that sort of conceptual model why that's happening is really important. So you ground truth the models and your current forecast. You take into account that knowledge that you learned on the MET course. And then you also need to take into account your customers' needs and their risk tolerance. So if there's a risk of something very large happening, we need to be able to communicate that to our customers so that they can mitigate the chances of these events happening. On to the next slide. As mentioned, we use a gridded forecast, it's called. These are some images here. So this is for the entire country. And it is a lot of information that goes into it. An example of this here is this is just the probability of precipitation, so receiving at least 0.2 millimeters of rainfall for the entire country across there, and then also the higher rainfall amount, so the 10% chance of receiving at least X millimeters. So in this case, parts of New South Wales, we were sort of expecting between 10 and 20 millimeters. You can see through those central areas there. For that higher rainfall, most likely just expecting a couple of millimeters though. And that's something that comes out, things like temperature, humidity, even fire danger ratings all come from this one program. And all of that data then becomes our lovely text forecast that you see saying something like possible shower and that range of rainfall you're expecting. So that all comes out of this program that we use, and then we edit and manipulate these grids to make the forecast itself. If you go on to the next slide, some of the other sections as mentioned, so there's severe weather and warnings, which is environmental prediction, and they service a lot more than what I understood when I first joined the Bureau. I will admit I hadn't quite realised just the amount of warnings we do, but of course that's things like the Australia Fire Danger Rating, so fire weather forecasts. We also do individual forecasts for fires as well that are ongoing. We have heat wave products, tropical cyclones, thunderstorms as well. That's just an outlook map on the bottom there. We also have cell-based warnings for capital cities and regional warnings for all thunderstorms that are likely to occur and cause any damage through there. And then the other section as well that's mentioned in the community is decision support. So these are the guys that have started working with our customers, and also the ones that are really telling people what these forecasts mean. So creating a forecast is really just a start, and a forecast isn't very useful if no one understands it or no one knows about it. So they're the ones that do things like local radio, TV interviews, social media, print media, and some other things that go on the website, as well as briefings to customers, including emergency services. So we actually have forecasters embedded within emergency services and fire weather organisations around the country. So they'll be giving tailored briefings every day to these sectors to make sure that they really understand what the weather is and can mitigate it as much as possible. So it's a lot to do, but it's really important that the public understand what our forecasts mean and what it means for them. So it's not so great to just tell someone that you're going to see 90km/h wind gusts. We want to be able to tell them what it means to them, that there's a risk that a tree might fall on the car, that sort of thing. And then of course the other side of that, as mentioned, is the media side. So this is just some examples. So we've got on the left there is my colleague Jono, who is doing a video. We're doing some training on videos. You can see in the middle, that's myself presenting one of the videos. So that's what they look like. That goes on social media. And then off to the right is my colleague Diana, who was doing a press conference at the time in the operational center as well. So there's plenty that goes on throughout there about that communication and just making sure everyone understands what's about to happen. Just on to the next slide, just some highlights and interesting things I've managed to do during my career. One of them was I was able to present at a WMO conference in the Solomon Islands on impact forecasting in 2019. I've since virtually presented at similar conferences in Thailand and Vietnam last year, which was pretty impressive. That's an image of me with the presenters from around the country, including places like South Africa, Barbados, and the US that all presented there as well. Tropical cyclone forecasting I did for both Queensland and the Northern Territory, and is a real big highlight for me because I am a weather nerd, and tropical cyclones are my favorite weather type. So it was a pretty amazing being able to work in the warning center and help get that message out. And I also managed to be part of a documentary on Australian weather with National Geographic, which was pretty impressive. One thing I haven't done, but it's definitely on a list of things I would love to do in the Bureau, is Antarctica. So that's a nice images there of my colleague Jackson, who was actually on the Met course with me, and he has gone to Antarctica. So one of the sort of unique things about the Bureau is that you can actually go to Antarctica and forecast there as well. I'm going to leave it there and hand over to Bronwyn, who'll talk a little bit more about her experience on the Met course in Sims.
Thanks, Grace. So hi all, as has been mentioned, I'm currently working as a Defence Decision Support Meteorologist, and I'm up at the Oakey Army Aviation Centre. I wanted to just have a quick chat about being a recent graduate and how I got here. Next slide, thanks, Mick. So the first photo there is from my graduation at the end of 2019, where I celebrated completing my undergrad in maths and physics. But until my last year of uni, I didn't know that being a meteorologist was a career option for me. I'd gone into science with a passion for understanding how the world worked and a drive to create positive change, but I wasn't entirely sure how I was going to use my love of maths to actually make that happen. I'd struggled with the disconnect between what we learned in the classroom and what was actually happening outside my window. So when I stumbled on a stall for the Bureau at my careers fair and heard about all the amazing things that Mick and Grace have been talking about, I walked away knowing that this is what I wanted to do. So I applied mid-2019 and went through a similar application process to what Mick talked about, with a few more in-person elements as it was pre-COVID. And by the end of the year, I was offered a role and given a place on the 2020 grad dip and moved down to Melbourne in Feb of 2020. One of my highlights of the course was our cohort, who you can see in the middle two panels there. We had everything from flower farmers to miners to people who'd actually studied weather at uni. And bouncing ideas off each other and learning collaboratively was amazing and is quite similar to operational forecasting, as well as having a group of people to nerd out about clouds with. It's always a highlight. Going into the course without any weather background was incredibly intimidating, but the maths and physics I'd learned were a great foundation that I could then build on. The two biggest transitions I found were learning the lingo, which once I realized everyone else was also doing, made me feel a whole lot better. And going from being a student who's paying to study to one who's now being paid to study, and managing that expectation of what it meant for me to now be working full-time as a student was one of the biggest challenges I had on course, particularly when we had a sudden transition to work from home with the onset of the pandemic. And that duck pond you can see there is where I completed most of my course because I had a few tech hiccups along the way. So we didn't have a typical Met course, but once we got past those tech hiccups and we started to work collaboratively again, it was still an amazing experience. Next slide, please, Mick. So since completing Met course, I was posted to the National Security Program, which aims to enhance the capability of the Australian Defence Force through providing weather intelligence. We service 7 bases around Australia, with a further group working at Headquarters Joint Operation Command Centre down in Bungadore. So I was posted to Oakey, and straight off course, I got on a plane up to Brisbane, had the biggest nerd out of my life, watching the clouds and the inversions as the first time being in a plane and understanding what was happening outside. After a stint in hotel quarantine, I spent a few weeks at Oakey and Amberley, being able to complete a familiarization as well as gaining my observer's qualification, which is an additional role we have when we're working on base. To gain my competency to actually be a forecaster for aviation, I started this year in the Brisbane Aviation Forecasting Centre in a process called dueling, which is where you shadow a forecaster and over time take on more and more of the responsibility until you can do the full shift alone. It was my first experience on a 24/7 shift roster, and personally, it took me about 2 months to figure out exactly what worked for me and what didn't, though I know that some people have done better and some it took even longer. Once I completed that training, I moved out to Toowoomba, and now I'm working at Oakey, and I love my job. Our office runs a little bit differently to what Grace talked about, because we are embedded within the School of Army Aviation. which means that I'm the only forecaster on shift here. We also only work 9 days a fortnight each, and this generally covers 6 a.m. through till the end of flying. And it's broken into 2 shifts. So I'm responsible for doing the aviation forecast for Oki and my surrounding area, but my role is more centered on working directly with my customers through briefings, ad hoc requests, as well as fulfilling the role of a weather observer. Every day, I have the chance to interact with pilots who are using my forecast, as well as other stakeholders around base like air traffic control, refuelers, and the school and our crash response team. A bad weather day can be challenging and exhilarating, where I have pilots, refuelers, aircrew all in my office wanting a briefing while I'm trying to call tower to tell them there's a storm on the way, as well as actually tracking that thunderstorm as well. I never thought this is where I'd end up, and despite a few bumps in the road, I wouldn't change a thing. So that's a little bit of how I got to where I am, and I'm going to pass back to Jordan.
Thanks very much, Bronwyn. That was really interesting, and I hope that gives you a lot of information on what it's like to be a meteorologist. Now is an opportunity for you to ask some questions to all of our panelists, so we'll get to as many as we can. We might run a little bit over time, but hopefully that means we'll get to more of your questions. And some of the ones that I've seen in the chat are very specific to your needs, and they might be better handled via an email, and we'll tell you the email to contact us through a little bit later on. So James has sent us through something for you, Mick, wanting to know approximately how many positions are offered each year.
That's a really good question. That number goes up and down each year according to operational need. This year we have 23 Bureau graduates on course. Last year it was 17, 15, something like that. So the numbers have been up. With the internal restructuring of the Bureau, we continue to need warm-up right bodies. So I couldn't tell you. I'm actually having a meeting later this coming month to finalise that. But, you know, probably if you were to push me against the wall and say, Mick, tell me, anywhere between 12 and 24 is my guess.
Okay. All right, great. Holly has sent a question in, and I think best handled by you, Grace. What are the typical shift hours?
That depends which section you work in, but for 24/7, most sections work a 12-hour shift. So I start either at 7 a.m. or 7 p.m. and generally work till 7:30. So there's a half an hour handover I have with my team. Other sections, though, aren't 24/7, and so their hours might vary a little bit. For example, I think some of the other offices start around either 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. and might go to about 2, and then someone else turns up around midday and goes till 8 p.m. So it just depends which team you are. In terms of your sort of shifts and the structure it works, that is agreed upon with your team itself. So as long as it meets the need of the team itself, you can actually make your own sort of roster, if you will, and it's voted upon so that it's sort of majority wins in that case. So yeah, most of them though for 24/7 generally are 12 hours, as most people prefer to work that.
Okay, I think this question would best go to you, Bronwyn, and Grace, you could chime in as well. Julia would like to know, how do you cope with shift work and maintain a work-life balance?
So it's very individual as to what works for you. Personally, I found that I had to be really specific about my sleep schedule, and I had to make sure that I was exercising properly. Because when I was in Brisbane, I was doing the 24/7 shift work that Grace has just been talking about. And in that first part, because I have insomnia, I used to just sort of wing it. But after a 12-hour shift, you can't really survive on 2 hours of sleep. So I had to become really regimented in how I would finish shift. I'd go to the gym, I'd then come in and do my day. And the other thing is that depending on your roster, you have a couple of days off where you can recover and you can catch up with friends. So it's a case of learning what works for you. I had to go to bed really late if I was going to work a night shift and then get up right before shift. Other friends had broken sleep patterns. It's a very individual thing, but they do give you some help and training when you get to that point.
Okay. We also got a question from Brittany, who has asked, sorry, this will be for you, Mick. Is there a long distance or remote options for the program? Also, do you have a choice of where you get to work?
That's some really good questions. The short answer is your initial posting is here to Melbourne, and so you have to be here face to face. we have done remote learning, but that was COVID associated, so we moved the interstaters into Melbourne. If you're not here, you miss out on the peer learning, you miss out on the experience. There's a lot of things that makes it a lot harder for me to assess about you through probation stage and all sorts of other things if I don't see you all the time. What was the other part of the question? Sorry, senior moment.
Yeah, just she also wanted to know, do you have a choice in where you get to work?
Yes, of course you do. So again, the same meeting where I'll hear the numbers for next year's course will be the final numbers of positions here, there, and everywhere around the country. And so I help mediate a process where staff put in their preferences, both in terms of geography, preferred geography, but also what they anticipate their career path is going to be, and those things get weighed up. So you certainly do have opportunity to say, these are my 1, 2, 3 preferences, and it's a process we negotiate through.
Okay, fantastic. Grace, there's a question that you've been eager to answer. It's from Aaron. What happens when a forecaster or team makes a mistake?
It's a great question. We are trying to predict the future, so unfortunately we will not be correct all the time. I wouldn't say it's more about making mistakes. Your forecast will be wrong at time. So it's about understanding and being able to back your forecast more than anything else. If you had solid reasoning for why you made that forecast, then that forecast is correct at that time. Of course, when new information comes along, you have to take that into consideration, and that's why we amend forecasts. But we can't be right all the time, and it is part of the job to really understand that. You can't be perfect in this role. It's just something you have to live with and continue to learn through it. Of course, generally, depending which section you are, some of them you work alone, but a lot of them you're working with a team. So you'll have other people to ask for guidance on and learn as you go. But yes, it's not one that we can be right all the time. And there are times that our forecasts will not be correct. And it's really about being able to take that as a learning opportunity and also pivot when needed. So don't be afraid to amend a forecast when it isn't going to plan.
Okay, great answer there. Matt Vey has asked, and this is a good question for you, Mick, is it possible to transition from an operational meteorology role to a research and innovation role?
Yeah, really good question. As far as I'm aware, there's no defined path for that. So, if you move into operations, there's various steps to this level and to that level and get that experience. In the past, meteorologists have sidestepped. There's certainly plenty of opportunities to move sideways into projects, whether or not they're precisely based in the research section or they're part of maybe the environmental prediction team and it's developing new products and services, new ways of displaying data, et cetera, a big part of, as I understand it, the whole decision support services down the track is being very closely involved with clients and being involved in developing new products to meet their needs, and that might mean some collaboration. So I guess it's we're a learning organisation, which means there's always opportunities to learn more and to contribute to that learning. So yeah, definite possibility, but not a defined pathway. So we don't have a sponsored position on course from the research team. It's into operations and then see where you land afterwards. But you've got choice in steering rather your own career. So if you see the opportunity, have a crack, grab hold of it.
Yeah. A question from actually quite a few people. They've asked, should people who are in their final year of study apply?
Yes, absolutely. So very clearly, when you come to the interview process, you won't have completed your degree. This is a graduate program, and so graduate programs consider people in their final year of study. What it means, of course, is that we'll assess your academic capability on the results that you have to date, and based upon you passing your Unit 2 exams or your Semester 2 exams, then you'll be accepted, provisionally accepted. So you just have to let us know, yes, I've passed my degree, if you've been accepted into the program based upon what you've done today. So yeah, 100%.
Okay. Andrew has asked a question, and maybe this is for some of the guys who have done the course, like Bronwyn and Grace. How full-time is the course? Like, are there semester blocks involved? Does all the training happen at Broadmeadows in Melbourne? Is a little more fleshed out of that, please.
Yeah. So when I did the course, it was a full-time job. you're paid for a 73.5-hour fortnight, and you work that and sometimes a little more if you've got a really tough waves assignment. Thanks, Mick. But essentially what you're doing is on the course, it's sort of broken into, when we did it, 4 units. So each unit is a collection of different courses, and you have this timetable where you attend lectures, you go to pracs, but then you've also got time during your workday where you're able to do assignments and work together collaboratively to get through all of that. And it works on like a Monday to Friday schedule. And then once you finish unit, you move into the next one. And I think we got a week off at the end of unit 2 going into unit 3. And then you do your final unit is a simulation exercise. So when we did it, we did a combination of, you got to trial what being an aviation forecaster was like, and then you did a shift where you did something similar to more what Grace does in national productions. And it sort of got you working towards going more operational at that stage, but it's definitely a full-time job.
Okay. We are unfortunately running out of time. We will go a little bit over time, so I'm apologizing to everybody for that now. But Mick, I'm going to ask you 4 questions. You're going to try and answer them as quickly as possible, all right? So the first one, it's a little mini lightning round. A few people have asked, what if you've got some maths and physics, but not enough, like they've done an economics degree?
You'll need to go back and fill in the gaps. I've had people go back to university to complete an entirely new degree because they really wanted to be a meteorologist.
Okay. Samuel has asked, are there any offices in Adelaide?
Yes, there is, but not aware of there being new positions available there in the new model.
Okay. Ayla has asked, when will we know if we've been accepted?
The timeline is on another slide, probably late October, early November.
Okay, and lastly, Taylor has asked, is there any advice for people who are reapplying? Maybe they weren't successful last year. Any advice for those kind of people?
Contact Graduate Mets at bom.gov.au and ask for feedback.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for your patience, everybody, in sending your questions in. There's been a lot of information given here today, but if you did miss the start, Mick, could you please summarize about what we spoke about today, and more importantly, where you can find more information and contact us?
Okay, so we've looked at the job requirements and what the job looks like for a graduate MET position. Applications close at 11:30 on the 26th of July. They open on the 2nd. You can see the URL there. If you click there, you will be able to enter your details and fill out the form. The positions are multiple positions, anywhere between a dozen to 2 dozen for next year. You need a minimum of 2nd year maths and physics. There will be video interviews that follow, and then an online assessment centre in September and October.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Mick. And just a quick reminder, we will be sending out the presentation materials from today's webinar in an email, hopefully later today or tomorrow, and you'll be able to see all the links and stuff. So don't worry about getting them down now. You'll get them soon. If you'd like to get the Bureau information on your favorite platform, why not connect with us on social media, our blog, or our excellent Bomb Weather app? And you can subscribe to receive updates direct to your inbox from the Bureau about everything the team have talked about today, or information on upcoming webinars. Speaking of which, we do have one that's going to be focusing on National Science Week and its theme, Food Different by Design. It's a very important week for us here at the Bureau, and we're celebrating by talking about what we do to contribute to Australia's food production. If you'd like to come along, then please click the registration link that's in the chat now so you can join us. So that brings us to the end of today's webinar. For questions we didn't get to, please email graduatemets@bom.gov.au. That's graduatemets@bom.gov.au. A big thank you to Mick, Grace, and Bronwyn, who you heard from, and Lita and Sharon behind the scenes for your time in developing the content and sharing your knowledge with us. And to you, thank you for tuning in today. We hope you enjoyed this session, and we do hope you'll join us again next time. If you'd like to continue the conversation, please use the hashtag BOMWebinars in your LinkedIn posts. As mentioned earlier, this session has been recorded, and we will have the video ready for your on-demand viewing pleasure in the next couple of days, so watch this space. As mentioned earlier, and finally, but most importantly, we want your feedback. It's our aim to give you the highest possible quality webinars, but we can't do that unless you share your experience with us. So please, once this webinar closes, a short survey will pop up. We'd be really grateful if you could complete that anonymously for us. Once again, thank you for your time. We look forward to seeing you again soon. Goodbye.